welcome back to another Film Geek video. In just a moment, I'm going to start ranking my favorite horror movies from the year 2024. But let me explain how this works. Now, each month I do a monthly ranking video of all the films that I saw, all of the reviews that I did in theater, streaming services, such, in the month. So what I did was I went back and I picked my top favorite movies from each month, and I decided to make a ranking video for all of those. So this is all of my top horror films from the year 2024. But before we get this started, before we head over to that series of tubes that we call the internet, I have some honorable mentions that I would like to talk about first. And the first film is one that kind of came out and then just was forgotten, unfortunately, and that is Lisa Frankenstein. Lisa Frankenstein is directed by Zelda Williams, daughter of Robin Williams, and it tells the story of a young, well, I don't think she starts off gothic, but it's a young high school girl who, I guess you could say, inadvertently brings a man back from the dead. They don't really go into a lot of detail on how this guy came back from the dead. He just comes back from the dead. This Victorian age zombie guy comes back from the dead. Well, in order for him to stay alive and be friends with Lisa, he has to get certain body parts that he's missing replaced. So they go around to different high schoolers that she doesn't like, or just people in general, and gets those body parts. Guys, this movie didn't really do so great when it first came out in theaters, but I will tell you right here, this film is a lot of fun. This movie is going to be a cult classic someday. That's just the kind of vibe this movie has. It takes place during the 80s, and it has a very Heathers meets horror kind of vibe, and I absolutely loved this film, and I really feel that people didn't really give this movie a good enough shot. It should have really gotten a little bit more praise than it did. It just seemed like it showed up, vanished, and that was the end of it. No one talked about it again. But here at the Film Geek, I feel differently about that. So that brings us to our next honorable mention, and that is a little creature feature by the name of Sting. Sting tells the story of folks that are living in a big old apartment complex, and this young girl happens to find a spider. Well, when you know it, this spider happens to be an alien spider, and then the thing starts to grow to abnormal sizes. It doesn't really get to the point where it's like the size of a dog, like a medium-sized dog is where it goes. Needless to say, giant spider, wackiness ensues. This film was a lot of fun. This is just one of your popcorn, fun monster movies that you turn on, you laugh, you have a few jump scares, and that's pretty much what the movie is. But it also has some great characters, some really fun and funny moments. All in all, guys, it's a really well-made little creature feature with some pretty dang good special effects. There are some CGI moments, but 9 times out of 10, most of the spider moments are 100% practical. That really makes that monster feel like it's right there in the room with you. Our next honorable mention is one that, again, it's one of those movies that came out, it was kind of divisive amongst a lot of fans of the series, and that is the movie Maxine. Now, I did enjoy this movie, and this was a high suggestion from me, but when I put it together with the rest of the trilogy, I just didn't feel like it had enough. Like, it wasn't as good as the other 2 films. It was really cool to see the ongoing stories and struggles of Maxine once she gets off of the farm at X, because I thought that it kind of made a continuation story of, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's like, oh, so that's what happens after she jumped into the back of that truck and old Leatherface danced around in the street with a chainsaw. And I did like that about the film. I liked that it brought in a lot of Italian horror into it, a lot of exploitation type 70s, 80s horror into it. And I know that a lot of people were kind of expecting like an 80s slasher vibe, and they got more of an 80s Italian slasher vibe. But I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was great. I thought the acting was cool. It was nice to see the characters end. And it's not really something we get to see every day with Final Girls. Normally, if the Final Girl shows up in the next film, Final Girl's not going to make it through the second film. And that's not necessarily the case in this one. So definitely check out Maxine if you really enjoy Pearl and X, which you probably already have. Checked out Maxine, that is. Okay, our next honorable mention on the list is a little movie by the name of Stream. Stream is what I like to call a horror movie lover's horror movie. A horror film that is made by people who absolutely love horror films. This movie is brought to us by the team that gave us all of the Terrifier movies. This film came out right before Terrifier 3, and I don't think it had much of a theatrical release in a lot of places. It tells the story of a family that needs to kind of reconnect with one another, so they decide to go stay the weekend at this resort. Well, some crazy stuff happens at that resort. Some people decide to take over the place and hold the people inside of this building hostage, but they don't know that, and then they're pecked off one by masked killers. And then, to top everything off, the entire night is streamed on the internet so that viewers can make bets. This movie is insane, fun, slasher type of goodness. This movie is not really heavy on story. It's totally flash and fun. This is popcorn horror at its finest. There are tons of shout outs to other horror movie stars you're going to see throughout this entire film. All in all, this is just brain turn off fun, okay? Sit down with your big old bag of microwave popcorn and enjoy a real silly over-the-top slasher. This film is definitely on the list. I'm really hoping that we're going to see a series come off of this one because I really would like to see where this story goes. That brings us to the final honorable mention, and real quickly I am going to take a quick swig. You can probably tell I'm getting a little hoarse, so time to lubricate the pipes. Alright, so the final mention that I would like to mention honorably is the movie Shade. Now, if you've noticed, I have mentioned this movie several times since I've seen it. I really championed this film, really enjoyed this movie, but unfortunately, it doesn't quite have the quality level on a mass scale, in my opinion. I really love this film, and I think that it's definitely something that you should check out. This movie really dives into things like generational trauma, abuse, and depression. These are things that are at the top and the forefront of this movie. It's told through the eyes of brothers who are finding out that their family has a secret. And that secret is the depression, mental illness, anguish, things of that sort. And the way that everything is told is through this weird ghostly woman that appears in areas. So whenever our main character starts to have those feelings of anxiety, depression, fear, things of that sort, then this creature, this woman in white, or white woman, just pale white woman, will show up and just creep everybody out. Now, the thing is that this was a really well-made film if it's something that you vibe with, which I totally did. I understood what this movie's point was. This movie is definitely more message over trying to scare you. It wants to deliver the allegory and the message of the film a lot more than it's trying to scare the crap out of you. And there are some, tense scenes. There are some moments where you get a little frightful, but most everything in this movie is just metaphors of what's going on. So when you watch it, you might, be expecting like a creature feature, because that was one of my complaints going into this movie, was I really felt that it was advertised more of a creature feature, less of a metaphor. And I think that might have hurt some viewing when people were going in to see this film. They were expecting something a lot scarier, a lot creepier, and they were delivered something that was a little bit more on the preachy side. Not that that's a bad thing, but let me put it to you this way. If you are someone, or you know someone, who has been the victim of abuse or is part of generational abuse, has depression issues, maybe anxiety issues, they're going to really understand what this film is all about. And the other thing about this movie that's really important is it really focuses more on men's mental health. Because let's face it, guys, we have a real bad habit of just sucking up those emotions and just putting things off, not getting out there, not talking about it. And let's be honest, that is horribly unhealthy, folks. I am telling you firsthand. And that is why this movie has meant the world to me, because I've had those moments. I've had times where I've had to turn to others to just listen to me talk about my issues and my problems. And I can tell you guys, it works. Stop bottling it up. Stop keeping it inside of you. Let those feelings out. Let yourself emote emotions. And this movie does carry a very positive feeling to it. So enough of me sitting here going on and yammering on. It is time for us to head over to that beautiful series of tubes that we like to call the internet and rank my favorite horror films of 2024. Welcome to the internet, everybody. Let's get this party started. Now, the way I like to do things is at the end of the month, I like to do a ranking video where I take my favorite to least favorite film of that month. Well, what I did with my horror list is I went through all of the horror movies in each month and picked my favorites from each of those months, except June, because June had 0 horror films. I don't know how that worked out. But August was loaded. So thank God for that. And well, to be perfectly honest, it made it very difficult to find a top one for the month of August. Okay, so let's get this party started, shall we, with number 12. And number 12 is a film that comes to us all the way from France, and that is The Soul Eater. The Soul Eater tells the story of a small mountain village in France that's being terrorized by either a mythical creature or a psychopath slasher. Either way, people are dying and the police are investigating. This is your 90s investigation horror film, something in the vein of, Silence of the Lambs or Seven. The story starts off at the beginning of the film. The first half of the movie is mostly investigation, and it does get a little draggy, not gonna lie. But after that first hour, in the second hour of this movie, when you start getting into more of the killers, and you get to see more of the kills and the violence, let's just say this movie definitely picks up. And the brutality of the kills is ridiculous. This movie has some amazing practical effects, and lots of ooey gooey blood if you're a fan of the gore. So that brings us to number 11, and number 11 is a little creature feature that comes to us all the way from France also, and that is Infested. Infested tells the story of a young man who's really into collecting venomous critters. So he goes to his, I guess you could say, dealer of venomous critters, and he finds a spider that no one's ever seen before, and it might be the most deadly spider in the entire world. So what do you do with such a deadly spider? Why, you shove it in a Nike shoebox, take it back to your high-rise apartment, and hope it doesn't get out. It gets out. It gets out. It gets out and impregnates a bunch of other normal house spiders, creating an army of vicious killer spiders who have you on the menu. This film is an absolute creep fest from beginning to end. If you love a good old-fashioned horror film with spiders and normal goofy crap like that, then this is definitely up your alley. This is the kind of movie that when you're done with it, you are going to want to take a shower because you're going to swear to God little critters are climbing all over your body. That is the kind of film this is, and that's why it finds itself on this list of best of horror films. Coming in at number 10 is kind of a weird little one, and that is Cuckoo. Cuckoo tells the story of a family that moved to a resort in the middle of nowhere. And while they're there, their teenage daughter, is attacked by this strange, what turns out to be creature, woman, while coming home from work one night. Now, this film sounds like an average creature feature, but the movie decides, I don't want to do just normal crap, and it dives into some surrealist horror. If you're someone who does not like that kind of stuff, I can definitely understand that, and that is something that I'm going to warn you about. I do love surrealist horror, so I'm sorry. That's why it finds itself on the list, because it's my list. And I really dug this film. There are some good jump scares in this movie. There are some, I call them newer jump scares, where it's just like something creepy happens out of the blue. Dishes are done, man. Cuckoo. Okay, so it's a good little creepy film with this monster running around terrorizing people and whatnot. This film has limited jump scares. It mostly follows more of a, like I said, surrealist, more of a vibe, dread kind of horror to it. But what it does deliver is just a really fun, unusual film. If you're a fan of B horror, you'll probably really like this movie because it definitely has a B horror vibe. The way this movie is shot and filmed, it has that look to it. So definitely something that you should put on your radar if you haven't checked out Cuckoo. Okay, so that brings us to number 9, and we're diving into a type of horror that I generally do not like, and a type of movie that I do not like, and that is The First Omen. So not only is this a religious horror film, it is also a prequel. Two things I don't really a huge fan of, in all honesty. I wasn't raised in a fire and brimstone kind of religious setting, so that kind of stuff doesn't scare me. So if your villain is Satan, it's just not that scary to me. To me, it's just a guy in a red suit with a pitchfork, okay? Just gonna let you know. But this movie takes it to another level. It is scary, it is creepy, it is just got this insane vibe throughout the entire film, and it's a prequel. That is something that also makes this film unusual for me because I rarely enjoy a prequel. In my mind, a prequel does absolutely nothing except make you pay for it. Nothing but a cash grab. Keep those fans' butts in seats, especially when it comes to horror prequels. It's like, I don't want to know how the sausage is made, man. I just want to see the sausage kill folk. And that's how I feel about horror movie prequels. But this time around, this film delivered in some very unique areas. This is the very first time I have ever seen a prequel that brings new stuff to the table and could possibly start an entirely new series in this franchise that won't even touch all of the old stuff. That is amazing to me, and that's why this movie finds itself on the list. Okay, that brings us to our next film, number 8. And number 8 is a fun little indie creeper that we saw early in the year, and that is stop motion. Stop motion is just, like I said, an insane creep fest. Not necessarily a scary movie. There's not a lot of stuff that's necessarily like that in this film. This is just one of those movies where you literally don't know what's going to happen next. And that's what the fear lies in. It tells the story of a puppeteer who is making a stop motion film. Well, I should say her mother is making a stop motion film. And her mother is like a master of the craft. But due to arthritis, she can no longer use her hands. So she uses her daughter to move all of the puppets. The mother passes away during the course of filming what was going to be her grandest film ever. So her daughter decides, I am going to pick it up the torch and finish the movie for her mother. And of course, it drives her insane. Guys, this movie is an absolute creep fest from beginning to end. If you are a fan of the Tool videos for their music, you're probably going to love the stop motion animation in this film because it is so creepy and weird. The actual puppets, whether I'm not sure in reality if they were made from meat, but in the movie they are made from meat. And let's just say looks gross and nasty and wet and drippy and all of that crap, and it really adds to just the overwhelming creepiness of this movie. The whole purpose of this film is this woman the actual artist, or was she her mother's puppet all along? Check out stop motion and you tell me. All right, that brings us to number 7, and we're gonna dive into some fun horror. We had the scary, creepy metaphor horror that freaks us out and makes us, think ill of the world for a while. And now we're gonna have ourselves a little bit of fun with Destroy All Neighbors. If you are a fan of the Reanimator series brought to us by horror legend Stuart Gordon, then you are going to love this movie. This movie tells the story of a man who is a prog rock musician who is writing his magnum opus. And he's just there. He's perfectly close. Well, at least that's what he tells people. Well, during the course of working on his album, he gets a new neighbor. And this neighbor is loud and annoying and is destroying his ability to do his job. And wouldn't you know it, that neighbor has a horrible accident and dies. And it could be this guy's fault. So instead of, telling somebody this happened, he decides he's going to use it for influence to create the greatest prog rock album ever. I need a quick drink, sorry. Guys, if you love wacky, silly, goofy, splatter horror, this is definitely the movie for you. I think I started my year off with this film. I think it might have been one of my first movies I reviewed in 2024. And I honestly had so much fun with this movie. It came out and then just kind of vanished. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, and this movie is so fun. The puppets are great. The practical effects are a lot of fun. It is splatter horror at its finest. It should be on Shudder still, so if you have a subscription to Shudder and you love a good old-fashioned splatter horror, then this is definitely something that you need to put on your radar. Okay, that brings us to our next film, and that is Strange Darling. Now, I really debated on whether or not Strange Darling should fall on the horror list or just my regular movies list. I decided to put it on horror because it is pretty horrific. Yes, it is pretty much a thriller style film. There's not a lot of horror thrown in it that most audiences would consider horror, but in all honesty, guys, this movie delivers one hell of a horrific story that just leaves you guessing at the very end of what you just witnessed. It tells the story of a young woman who is in a cat and mouse game with another man that may or may not be trying to kill her. That's all I'm going to say about this movie, because anything more you know about this film could possibly ruin things for you. This is definitely one of those movies also that require a second viewing, not because it's complicated, but because you will miss little aspects of the film that you can go back and watch again and notice and be like, oh, that's why this happened. That's how this happened. And so on and so forth. It's just a movie that really demands another viewing, not because it's bad or complicated, just because you're going to want to go back and make sure you got everything out of this film. I really enjoyed this movie. I thought that this was a great suspense thriller, on the edge of your seat kind of movie. There's not a lot of violence. There's some pretty good violence that's in this movie, but it's not like it's something it's over the top. It's not gory. It's not malicious. Well, it's malicious. It's people getting killed. But you know what I mean. Gratuitous. That's what I was looking for. It's very realistic type of stuff, but very bloody, very, very like that, you know. All right, so that brings us to our next film, which is a movie that really scared the crap out of me. I have not been scared at a movie in a long time, and this one did it for me, and that is Oddity. Oddity tells the story of a woman who is basically trying to figure out why her sister was murdered. Her sister is trying to rebuild an old house. Her and her husband are refurbishing this old house in the middle of nowhere, or I should say castle is what it looks like. And one night while she's there, a person comes by, and let's just say sister gets killed. So then the other sister decides to investigate what's going on. And this sister owns a special store with some very unique items of the spirit realm. This movie is tense, scary, spooky film. And some might call it a slow burn because it's one of those movies that builds and builds and builds and builds. And once it finally gets to that payoff, let's just say that it's a very good payoff. I don't find it a slow burn because I felt like this movie was pretty intense from go. I just had an overwhelming, creepy, dread-filled vibe throughout this entire film. And normally, I am someone who can smell a jump scare coming from a mile away. And this film kept surprising me over and over and over again. It really did scare the ever-living crap out of me. I felt like I was going into a horror movie for the very first time, or seeing a horror movie again for the very first time. The experience was just so much fun. I had a blast with this movie. So if you're somebody who has who is a person who has seen tons of horror films, you are to that point where the old jump scare, it just isn't what it used to be. This is definitely a film for you to check out. And I believe it is a Shudder original. Don't hold me to that, but I'm pretty sure it's on Shudder. So next up, before we move to our next film, I'm going to take another drink here. We are getting down to the end of the list, guys. We are getting there. We are getting there. All right, moving back into the world of possession and late night TV, we have Late Night with the Devil. Late Night with the Devil tells the story of a late night talk show who decide for their Halloween special, wouldn't it be fun if we had a person on here who claims to be possessed by the devil? Guess what? Yeah, she's possessed by the devil. And this film goes crazy. This is an absolute perfect footage horror film. It really feels like you are in the set of a 70s talk show. Every little detail of this movie was taken into consideration. It starts off like you're like, okay, I thought this was a horror movie. Why isn't anything scary happening? Well, it's because it's a talk show. You go through it like a talk show. No talk show starts off with its main attraction. You have to get through all the guests. But each one of those guests bring a little bit more of a hint to what's about to occur. I really enjoyed this film, guys. I had a blast with it. This was a definite must-see horror film, and I'm somebody who does not like a possession film. This is one of the very few possession films I have ever enjoyed, but I also am a big fan of found footage, so, you know, maybe that played into it. But every little detail of this film is so well done. Well, except for those damn AI photos. That was kind of weird, but they don't ruin the film. It was just a little bit of controversy that came out. Look it up. You can find out more. Literally, no one cared when it was all said and done. But I mean, I'm going to go back on it and say, though, I don't care if it's just a TV little promo blop that you do. Don't use AI, okay? It literally, you could have just got someone from the art department to draw stuff up. Don't use AI. All right, moving on. Late Night with the Devil, definite watch. Next up on the list, we have Longlegs. Now, I kind of brought this up with my Soul Eater, but another genre, and it's a subgenre of horror that just kind of vanished for the longest time, and that's the 90s psychopath killer. Now, we had a ton of those. The decade was just dominated by these serial killer movies, and then around the early 2000s, slowly but surely, those movies just kind of dwindled away. And we really haven't seen anything like this for a good 20 years. And then out of nowhere, we have something as amazing as Longlegs. Every aspect of this film is amazing. The acting is great. The story is great. The vibe, the feel, the cinematography, the special effects, everything in this film comes together to deliver an extremely creepy, just dread-filled movie. This film keeps you on the edge of your seat from the very beginning. Now, in my mind, I don't feel like this movie really delivered in like the scares department, but for the tension and suspense, this movie has it in droves. I really enjoyed this film. Nicolas Cage crafts a killer that you have not seen before. He puts his oomph into it, and that is something I've always respected and always loved about Nicolas Cage. Now, this movie's very good, don't get me wrong, but no matter what the movie is, no matter how bad that movie is, Nicolas Cage always shows up and gives a stunning performance. So here we have a very good movie with Nicolas Cage, with great dialogue, a great script, and so he was just allowed to do his thing. And if you're expecting the over-the-top, "Wah! This is my python skin jacket," you're not getting that from this Nicolas Cage. It's not that he's very reined in and subtle, it's just, let's just say he crafts probably the scariest villain that we had all year. That is going to bring us to our number 2 film. Now, number 1 and number 2, both of these movies really got me. I love both of these films, and I'd be perfectly honest, both of these movies, in my mind, are completely equal. But I have to have a winner. And I guess you could say a loser. Number 2. Number 2. So we're just going to get started with number 2, and that is Heretic. Heretic tells the story of 2 young women who are part of the Mormon church, and they're going door to door trying to spread the word of their religion. They get to this one house, and Hugh Grant happens to be the owner of this house, and let's just say he has some very unique views on religion and what he would like to try to teach these young girls about religion. This film goes into so many dark, scary, creepy areas. You will feel so claustrophobic throughout the entire film. Almost all of this movie takes place in one room. And even though it's in this one space, it delivers an extremely scary, tense, dread-filled movie. And a lot of that has to depend on the performances from the entire cast, which is pretty much just 3 people. Topher Grace has a small part, small but important, but mostly it's just the 2 young ladies and Hugh Grant. And the 3 of them deliver amazing performances. Now, Hugh Grant does kind of seem like a normal Hugh Grant, kind of awkwardly clumsy, charismatic kind of guy with a very toothy grin. But this guy is nothing but nice in this film. And I loved the way he performed his character. This movie was just a master class in what you can do with a great script and really good actors. You don't need tons of CGI. You don't need lots of special effects. You just need a good script, good story, and good actors. And this film is definite proof of that. And the reason why it doesn't find itself at number one is because my number one movie, I feel like it put a lot more into the film production-wise. So I decided because of that, it's going to get the number one spot. But in all honesty, guys, I do feel it's 100% equal to Heretic, and that is The Substance. Wow. This movie. Where do I go? What do I talk about? The Substance is starring Dennis Quaid and Demi Moore. It tells the story of an aging actress who used to be the big name in Hollywood, but her star has slowly dwindled as she's gotten older. And in order to be able to stay the popular, dream-like woman that she is, she gets a substance. She just finds out of nowhere. And this substance makes her young again, or it divides her. It divides her into a younger portion of herself. And this portion of herself, they swap back and forth. The thing about this movie is that they're the same person. But are they? This movie is so amazingly creepy, scary, weird, and just downright gross. There was one scene in particular that a lot of people have talked about, but it was Dennis Quaid eating shrimp. Just Dennis Quaid eating shrimp, talking about things. And it was just the sound design, the way he was doing things, it grossed me to my core. No body horror in this film grossed me out as much as Dennis Quaid eating freaking shrimp. It just disgusted me. And I was not the only person in the theater that felt that way. I was just sitting there just like, oh my God. And I turn to the side and I look over and there's this woman like right next to me doing the exact same thing. And we just kind of make eye contact and I'm like, it'll be over soon, I swear. It's just, God dang, I cannot take the sound or just watching someone chew food. Oh my God. So this film, in my mind, it delivered one of the most disturbing, disgusting scenes of any horror film this entire year, and that is Dennis Quaid eating shrimp. Oh my God. But beyond that, this film is amazing. Practical effects, every aspect of this film. There's one scene in particular with Demi Moore that was just astounding. The intensity of her acting in this scene was unbelievable. And all she was doing was getting ready to go out for the night. And every time she looked at herself in her mirror, she saw a blemish or something wrong with her. And so she would start wiping off her makeup, madly putting it back on again, and just going through this weird cycle over and over again. And it was just amazing. It was just such a well done scene. So intense acting. I loved it. This movie from beginning to end. Absolutely phenomenal film. Guys, if you aren't a fan of body horror, all I have to say is, for the love of God, put up with it for this movie. If it grosses you out, you're at home, okay? You can either hit that old little fast forward button when things get a little bit hard for you, or put a pillow in front of your face. It's okay now. It's on streaming. Get out there, check this movie out, because it is the best horror film of 2024. So saith me. Alright guys, there you have it. The Film Geek's best of 2024 horror films. And I'm standing by this list, doggone it. There's nothing you can say, but you're more than welcome to give me your list in the comments below. Now, I based off this entire list off of the movies that I reviewed. So if there's a horror film that was really awesome, I'm looking at you, Terrifier 3, I didn't do a review on it, so I didn't put it on this list. Thanks again, guys, for checking out the Film Geek. If you liked what you saw here today, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications, and give me the old thumbs up so I know you like what you're seeing. And if there's one more thing you can do, folks, that is keep watching movies. You know I'm gonna.